Alrighty guys, I thought it would be a good idea to just go through the notes with you so that you don't have to read and guess on your own. So basically these are the things that you would need to know before you start with your internal. So you guys will start with your internal next term, so after the school holidays. So for today, we're just going to focus on what is variation. So these are all the things that you would need to know before starting with your internal. So you would have seen that I have included this slide before speaking about each of these questions, just for you to know where we are in terms of addressing these different questions. So the first one that we're going to look at is, what is variation? So if you think about variation, it's obviously different than what you would think about in a normal sense. So in this instance, we are actually speaking about what biological variation is. Okay, so variation in a biological sense refers to genetic differences between species or within individuals within a species. So even though we all have the same genes as humans, so remember we all have a gene that codes for hair color, we have a gene that codes for eye color and so forth, but the way in which it is expressed is very different. So we have different alleles, and therefore, yes, we will have the same gene, but we will have different alleles, one allele from your mom, one allele from your dad, that will code for hair color, for instance, and the same with eye color. And therefore, we have all these great differences within the human population, within the human species. So for humans, we all have the same karyotype. So because we are all the same species, we will have 46 chromosomes. So obviously, this is not a human karyotype because you can see that there are only 30 pairs, whereas we will have 23 pairs, so we will have 46 chromosomes in total. So obviously this will be a different kind of species, but our karyotype will look very similar to this. So obviously we will have 23 pairs, so it will only go up until here. So the 23rd pair will be our X and Y chromosomes, or X and X if you are female. So I mentioned this in class already, so I'm just emphasizing the fact again that you will have one chromosome from your mom, one chromosome from your dad, and they will make up this pair. Okay. And so if you think about gene versus allele, so I said that we all have the same gene. So we have a gene that will code for height as well, one that will code for hair color, one that will code for eye color, and so forth. But within that gene is made up of two alleles. And so that is the way in which the gene is expressed. So it can be a tall allele or a short allele, and you will get one allele from your dad and one allele from your mom. Okay, and this slide also illustrates that same point. So within our alleles, we create great variation within the human species. So the second question that we need to answer is, why is variation important to the survival of the population, of a specific population? So we are just going to use this example because obviously COVID-19 is a big topic at this point. So if we think about why genetic variation is important within the human population at this point, and we compare it, or we use the coronavirus as the example to that, if you read through this part that says variation within species is very important, because if there is an outbreak like COVID-19, like we have at the moment, the fact that we are so genetically different enables some people to be able to survive this, but obviously others sadly won't. So this ensures that the whole human population won't become extinct. So at least because we have variation, it allows certain individuals to be stronger than others. And so within this outbreak of COVID-19, the human population will not become extinct, but we will continue to exist and reproduce. And therefore, the human population will then continue to live. So variation is a very, very good thing. It's very important within species, different species, because it enables some species to be stronger than others, so that if you have an outbreak of any source whatsoever, or maybe within plants, you can also look at the example of corn, because you have different strains of corn, different types of corn. Some corn will be will be able to survive, say for instance, insects that will come and feed on them, whereas others won't, and therefore we ensure that we do have some food still available and that we don't have corn becoming extinct because of it. So our next question is, explain the benefits of sexual versus asexual reproduction. And so basically that is the part where we will end for this term. So next term we will focus on what is cloning, how is cloning done, and why inbreeding is such a bad thing for biology or within a population. So this will be the last question that we will address within this video. Okay, so the first one, the benefits of sexual versus asexual reproduction. So let's first have a look at what asexual reproduction is. So in asexual reproduction, you basically only have one parent. So you don't have two genders involved in it. So you don't need a male and a female species in this scenario. So there's only one parent, okay? And so basically what will happen is that the parent will just simply divide. So this is the example of the amoeba, for instance. So you will have the parent that simply divides into two. So we call this binary fission, where it just simply splits into two, and then we have two daughter cells. And the daughter cells will be exactly genetically the same as the parent cell. So there's no genetic variation whatsoever. Okay, so this is a good thing. It usually happens with plants and only certain animal species, but obviously with humans, it doesn't occur like that, as you guys know. So the advantages of asexual reproduction is, first of all, it's very efficient. So it can happen very, very quickly. Okay. And then secondly, no time is wasted looking for a mate. So say, for instance, it's a species that usually doesn't move in groups, for instance, then there's no time wasted in order to look for a partner. So they can just split into two, and therefore they will continue to exist. Okay, because remember, that's the main focus for nature, is to be able to ensure the survival of those different species. And then the last thing is, another advantage to asexual reproduction is that they are genetically identical, meaning that if you have a very strong species, if you have a very strong individual, you can go and just replicate that individual so as to ensure that the offspring is just as strong as the parent. Okay, so that can be a great thing. So we actually use asexual reproduction with plants as well. So if you see a lovely plant from a friend's garden, for instance, you can take a bit of that plant and go and plant it in your own garden, and you will have an exact replica of that specific plant. So say, for instance, it's a plant with lots of beautiful flowers. So that specific plant will have many, many flowers. You can just go and plant it in your own garden, and you will have exactly a plant like that with many beautiful flowers as well. So that's a great advantage. So those are all the advantages of asexual reproduction. If we have a look at the disadvantages, a big thing is that there's no genetic variation. So if the environment changes, they may have little chance of survival. So that will be the case, like for instance with COVID-19. So if they are all the same, so you would think, oh yes, they're all exactly the same and they're very strong, and therefore all the offspring will be strong as well, because it's all clones of the parent. And something like COVID-19 happens, for instance, then that whole entire species will become extinct because of it, because there will be no genetic variation, which will ensure that some individuals will be stronger than others. So if you look at sexual reproduction, so sexual reproduction is where you need both a male and female. So there will be fusion between the gametes of the male and the gametes of the female. So fusion of the egg cell that will fuse with the sperm cell. So there needs to be fertilization that takes place in order to create a new individual. And obviously, with every egg cell that is released with a female every 28 days when she ovulates, that egg cell will have genetic material that is very, very different to the previous egg cell that was released. And the same with sperm cells. Each and every sperm cell will be genetically very, very different to the other sperm cell. So if you think about it just on a very simple level, the sperm cell can have, for instance, characteristics of blue hair and blue hair. Oh my word. No, that would be a Smurf, maybe. But anyways, this sperm cell can have characteristics of blue eyes and blonde hair. This one can have green eyes and brown hair, and this one can have brown eyes and brown hair, for instance. And then that will enable them to produce very different offspring. So therefore you will find that siblings will have the same mom and dad, but they will not look alike. They may not look alike at all. And that is just because there's lots and lots of genetic variation within this method. Okay, so with sexual reproduction, because it's two different gametes that fuses and two different parents, it ensures that there's great variation. So if we look at the advantages and disadvantages of sexual reproduction, and that is the part where we will actually end for this session. The advantages is, first of all, that there is great genetic variation, as I said. So meaning that some individuals will be much stronger than others, which will enable them to survive when conditions change. So we call that natural selection or survival of the fittest. And then disadvantages will be that obviously it will take some time to find a suitable partner or suitable mate to produce offspring. And then if you, for instance, have a very strong individual within that species, then they will survive, whereas others won't. So not all of the species will survive. Some will be weaker than others, which will ensure that there's only survival of the fittest. So yeah, that's it for this session. So you are basically, if you have any questions, you're most welcome to email me or just to send me, I don't know, a video or something, just to let me know in some way. But then next term we will just do what is cloning, how is cloning done, and then we will speak about inbreeding as well. So yeah, thank you guys for listening and tuning in.